Thank you. Respectable present. My subject is the minority rights in the Republic of Macedonia and the Macedonian situation in the neighboring countries. It's a complex interdisciplinary subject, quite vast, broad, and I will not present it all. Firstly, I'd like to point out the most important points, and later in the publication we'll be able to have a look at it all. Concerning the position of Macedonians in neighboring countries, Greece, Albania and Bulgaria, and then I compare it with the minority rights and protection of their rights, of the minority rights in Macedonia. In Greece, the thesis of ethnic homogeneous country, Macedonian national minority doesn't enjoy any rights, as we all know. In the greatest part of the 20th century, Macedonians were underwent denationalization, assimilation, genocide, especially in the Second Balkan War and the civil war in Greece, 46-49. In Bulgaria, the Macedonian national minority is not recognized except for the period of 1945-48. As we know, Bulgaria does not recognize the Macedonian language nor nation. Albania does not negate the existence of Macedonian national minority and Macedonian nation. It enables Macedonian language instruction in schools, in some primary schools in Prespa and Golobrdo. But at the census, it is not enabled for minorities to express their ethnicity. So recognition of some minority rights refers only to regions where these minorities live in greater number, Macedonian minority, Greece minority and other minorities. As opposed to this, in the Republic of Macedonia, one of the fundamental rights is the free expression of ethnicity, which, as we can see, is practiced during censuses also. The country, Republic of Macedonia, besides that, tries to promote the quality of life of minorities which are of a small number, and the term communities which are not in great number is from the constitutional amendments of 2001, with which the term nationality was changed from the Constitution of 1991, which is expression of the essence. It's not just a formal term, but it is trying to say something of essence, and formally essentially to express something that the state does not want to damage any minorities. Internationally recognized term is minority. Here we have communities which are not in majority, in order to avoid the pejorative expression minority. Because if you have majority, you have minority also, and then you have subordination relation. And if you have a situation as we have in Macedonia, affirmative action in favor of the rights of communities which are not in majority, then it should be highlighted, as I do. People from communities which are not in majority enjoy rights in all levels of social life in Macedonia. They are MPs, ministers. They have right to go to school in their own language, in literature. They have high positions in the army, in the police, and so on. affirmative actions that the state has towards them. Comparative analysis of my paper concludes that the right of minorities in the Republic of Macedonia are on a drastically higher level in compared to the rights that minorities enjoy in neighboring countries in comparison to European standards. The structure of my paper is such that it is divided into 4 parts. The first part is the situation with Macedonians in Greece. The second is the situation of Macedonians and minorities in Bulgaria. Third part, situation of Macedonians and minorities in Albania. And fourth part, status of communities or minorities in Macedonia. Subtitles in all 4 titles. I will shortly list now. The situation with Macedonians in Greece. My subtitle is Greece, Bulgarian and Greece-Turkish Convention on the Exchange of Population after the First World War. The short-lived recognition of the Slavic-speaking minority in Greece. Subtitle, Measures Against Macedonians in Greece in the whole 20th century. Subtitle, Measures Against Minorities in Greece and against other minorities in Greece, especially Turkish minority, which is of greatest number. Subtitle, Macedonian Ethnic Revival in Northern Greece in the last 20 years and more. Another part, Greek policy towards the Republic of Macedonia and Macedonians after 1991. The part about Bulgaria has 3 subtitles. Measures against minorities in Bulgaria. About Macedonians in Bulgaria. Comparison from recognition to denial of Macedonian minority in Bulgaria, except for a period of 1945-1948 when it was recognized during the friendly relations between Yugoslavia and Bulgaria. Except of those 3-4 years, we received total denial of our identity. And a third subtitle, Bulgarian policy towards Macedonia since 1990s. All 3 subtitles. In the part where I speak about the situation of the minorities in Albania are measures against minorities in Albania, the position of the Macedonian minority in Albania, and Macedonians in Albania in the post-Enver Hoxha era. After his death, 1985, when the isolation finished. It was the most isolated country in the world during Enver Hoxha. The fourth part, when I close the circle of comparative analysis, I talk about the status of the communities in the Republic of Macedonia, communities which are not majority, about their status according to the constitution and laws, and the collective rights of Albanians and minority rights of other communities in Macedonia. In the end, I give my conclusion. Concerning the Macedonians in Greece, we all know, in the Second Balkan War, the Macedonian people, Macedonian people suffered a lot. We had numerous examples of genocide against the Macedonian people on the territory occupied by the Serb, Greek and Bulgarian armies. According to the report of the Carnegie Commission, many towns like Vodan, Negoš, Bir, Inija, Vardar, Doiran and others, and over 200 villages were totally destroyed. In June 1913, the Greek army burned the Macedonian town of Kukush in Aegean Macedonia, as well as 4,000 houses in the surrounding of Ceres. So all these indicators show the genocide, the Greek genocide against Macedonians. Concerning the Greece, Bulgarian and Greece-Turkish conventions on the exchange of population, I would say today when we talk about ethnic cleansing, we qualified it as a war crime against humanity. Ethnic cleansing is a great violation of international law. After First World War, these two conventions for exchange of population, Greece-Bulgarian Convention on voluntary exchange of population from November 1919. I highlight voluntary, and the Greek-Turkish Convention for obliged exchange of population of January 1923. These two, in the framework of Versailles Peace Agreement and in the framework of the system of peace of peoples, which proved wrong for the Macedonian people. On greater scale, colonization concerning these conventions for exchange of population and other ethnic changes done referring to this brought change and had great consequences on the population of the Macedonians in the Aegean part. Up to that point, the Macedonian language was majority, and then it was reduced to minority, used only in the family at home. Greek and the Greek language in Aegean part of Macedonia from minority language at that part of Macedonia, Aegean part, became much broadly used language, and it was imposed on colonized Armenians, Turcophones, immigrants from Caucasus, and so on. Other papers also spoke of the short-lived recognition of the Slavic-speaking minority in Greece. The well-known Abecedar, 1925-26, but never used. Written, but never used. It was respond to the demand of the League of Peoples of that time to provide education, public religious services of the languages of minorities at that time, obligation imposed to others, to other countries, members of the League of Peoples of that time, and Greece only made a small step by printing this Abecedar, this textbook for learning Macedonian, and it was never used by students who spoke Macedonian. The measures against Macedonians in Greece, denationalization, exodus, exile after the Civil War 1946, 48, 49. Decree of 1953 for colonization of the border regions with new population with clear national awareness, homes of the exiled Macedonians inhabited by imposed population Greeks, and which brought the nationalization of Macedonians in Greece. Greece has similar politics towards other minorities against blacks. In part, the end of the 19th century, during the junta 67 they were imprisoned just because they spoke Vlach language. Now they have some minority rights in the way that they are called Greeks. But it's strange how these Greeks speak a different dialect, because we all know Vlach language is totally different from Greek language, but they call them. So it's called strange dialect of the Greek language. Concerning the Macedonian revival in northern Greece, we all know the end of since the 80s. I'd like us to open discussion on this. It's a fact that Mr. Sideropoulos present here and Mr. Tsarknias present here are a great example themselves. They can see what they have faced and heroically contribute for the revival, Macedonian ethnic revival in northern Greece in the last 20 years. The situation of minorities in Albania, more measures during Todor Živkov, especially the change of names, the minorities against the Turkish minority in Bulgaria was severe, against their religious customs, against their culture and education. What we are interested in the period of 1945-48, cultural autonomy in Pirin, Macedonia, recognized by Bulgaria, Macedonia National Theatre, teachers from Socialist Republic of Macedonia. They helped bringing Macedonian textbooks to these schools, other publications in Macedonian language. But what is characteristic for Bulgaria and their relations towards Macedonia? They do not recognize Macedonian language. They consider it dialect of a Bulgarian language, nor do they recognize Macedonians as a separate nation. And concerning the position of Macedonians in Bulgaria, what is characteristic is that statistic genocide they do, under inverted commas, because in 1946 255,000 Macedonians were registered. In 1995 there are only 180,000. And in the latest census, 2011, just 1,600 Bulgarian citizens declared to be Macedonians. That's the statistical genocide, as I call it, in Bulgaria. In Albania, the position of Macedonians, the position of other minorities is similar in some parts, especially during the Enver Hoxha system, systematic and forced displacement, changing names, toponyms, as the young colleague Jotevski spoke, drastic measures against religious customs. Concerning the position of Macedonians in Albania, it is better than the one in Greece and Bulgaria, however not well enough as standard minority rights. In Mala Prespa, yes, some part of the education is in Macedonian language of instruction, just as a Greek minority in the regions where they live, but minorities are not recognized in other regions of Albania, nor in Tirana and other towns. So it's a serious restriction of the Albanian policy against minorities. noticed by the Council of Europe, which covers the implementation of the convention by Albania. Status of communities, minorities in the Republic of Macedonia. They enjoy protection of their ethnic, cultural, linguistic, religious rights. They are represented in institutions of the system, just as we know. And just briefly, we have more elements. Since 2001, with the Ohrid Framework Agreement of August, and then the amendments in November. They became provisions of the Macedonian Constitution and are implemented as such. Finally, I'd like to conclude I rank the rights, that is the injustice that the minorities undergo in these countries, Greece, Bulgaria, Albania and the Republic of Macedonia. In natural senses, it's much easier to quantify, to determine, to measure. Here it's more difficult. However, I used two instruments, which I will just list now. Concerning state policy towards minorities, I divided them into 5 states which negate existence of minorities, states which tolerate existence of minorities, states which recognize existence of minorities on their territory, states that recognize minorities and protect them, and states where minorities have rights in terms of special autonomous status. All these 5 types and different types of pressure against minorities, I conclude my paper for this time. That is all I could do. Thank you for your attention. It would be honest to analyze somebody who teaches international law, since our interests of research sometimes overlap in international public law. It is my honor to say a few words after your presentation. Of yesterday's debate, we concluded, besides the fact that the states are obliged to implement verdicts of the International Tribunal of Justice, for some states this rule doesn't work, and they go back to their own institutions. Besides Council of Europe, there are other international organizations like the UN, where also the verdict of the European Court of Justice are named. The report with a special envoy of McDougall, when she did in 2008, her report. So I'd like to ask you, Professor, following the international legal order and the codification of international public law, what is the dilemma? What is the essence of the order of the international organizations? How do we understand that certain states, even though they violently break human rights, they are still members of these organizations? Once Greece drew back from the European Convention for Human Rights themselves, but from that moment on up to today, there is no other pressure on countries to stop violating human rights and to start implementing. So what is the essence today and the position today of the international organizations and nurturing international legal order.
Thank you much for your question. Thank you very much. You are right. The expert of the European nations, McDougall, visited Greece in September 2008 and issued a very relevant report to the United Nations, official findings on the human rights of minorities in Greece. It was issued in February 2009. In that report, Mrs. McDougall recommends that Greece should step back from negating the existence of minorities. And she suggests that she should focus on protection of the human rights of the minorities, to be free to associate, self-declare and identify, to fully abide by the decisions and the declarations and the conventions, in particular those that impose the use of the nomination Macedonian, Turkish, and so on, when it comes to the accepted identities by the conventions of the European nations. You are right when you say that we do have a decision by the European Court of Human Rights to allow the registration of the Macedonian organization in Lerin, but that has not been done in Florina, sorry. The European Court of Human Rights decided that Greece violates Article 11 of the European Convention of Human Rights when it comes to associations, but the European courts decided that they should refrain from, dissuade themselves from actually abiding or accepting the European Convention decisions. So what happens now? Do we have any way of imposing obligations? The court decisions should be by default effective, right? But as you already know, the European, just to finish my sentence, but in international law, in addition to the law, we have influences, pressures, lobbying, and sometimes national law overrules or supersedes international. Apologies, but we're not going to have the time to ask questions, more questions. Now we are going to just have one, the question.
To get this last presentation in. I do apologize, but we have a schedule that we also need to kind of respect and keep, because otherwise we keep running late, and I'm trying to remedy that. 1 minute always turns into 5. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Professor Tat.
Thank you very much. My name is Marius Iaconescu, PhD, professor at University of Bucharest. I like your paper, but I have a very important question for me, because I'm researching in the last years about the Blacks question in Balkans and another area. And in your paper, I couldn't see something about the Blacks minority in your country. Please understand, you and all people from this conference, a nation with more ethnical group is more rich nation. You told just about Albanians minority and the others.
To the question, please, Marius.
Yes, please tell me how could your authorities to preserve the cultural identity of Blacks in your country? Thank you very much.
As I said, the constitutional provisions and legal provisions address all minorities, including the Vlach minority. So of course, that is in one sentence the answer. Of course, a different position is of the minority that enjoys 20%, and the other is the position of one that enjoys 1% of the overall population. We have Article 14 from Convention of Protection of the Rights of Minorities stipulates that there should be sufficient number of representation of certain minority groups in order to implement their right. You cannot have teaching or lectures on the Vlach language with only having 1 or 2 students. You would have to have a consensus or quorum.